Hello? Did that just mute itself? I don't know. Um, Not sure if I feel like that was working a second ago. I'm not sure if the audio cut out. But yeah, so like week 4 was pretty much just introduction to assignment 2, right? So we did that. And the thing is, this week there's actually like there's not a lot to talk about because we've kind of explored all of the things in this course that are relevant to vanilla JavaScript. And most of what we have to talk about is like expanding on topics like, you know, user interface, user experience. React.js is kind of a big topic. So the point of this week's lecture is pretty much just to talk about assignment 2 and any kind of questions people have. So as you know, last week I kind of went through some sample code and some stuff to help people get started. And maybe we might not even need the full 2 hours tonight, of course. But, you know, like we could do an hour tonight and I could do a revision hour next week or something if people need some help. We'll see how we go. But yeah, so I guess the place to start is for people working on the assignment, you know, where are areas that you think we need to go deeper more? Cool. That's a good question. So Devansh has asked, my question for assignment 2 is, what is Bootstrap and how do I use it? So one good place to start, and I'm wondering, I think it's here. There's a week 5 lecture called Using CSS Frameworks, which are non-React. So the slides here are quite light, but there's a lecture on it. I guess the first question I'd ask is, have you watched this one? I recorded it like 5 months ago, so 4 months ago. So I don't like fully remember the detail, but yeah, it's like I feel like I covered a little demonstration of Bootstrap in there. So I'm just curious if you've seen that or not. Yeah, okay, well, go have a look there. I think that's probably the best place to start. And then if you have further questions from that, you could probably post in the forum. Or if it's desperately urgent, you could go watch that now and pop into the lecture in 20 minutes or something. It's up to you. But yeah, I think that'd be a good place to start. It's actually very much not complicated to get started, whether it's Bootstrap. Oh, it's okay. No, I don't expect everyone just to know off the top of their head what's where. But yeah, let's dig into this. So let's go back to what we had for assignment 2. So if you remember from the other day, this is where we kind of left assignment 2. And let me just find the actual... Oh yeah, that's right. We're going to run it with our Python. Great. Python 3-m http.server. Bam. Localhost 8000. Okay, great. There's our site. So we're continuing off from where we were in week 4. And there's been one question so far, which is Vedan says, perhaps handling multiple promises and appropriate request handling, e.g. for listing usernames in a post. So I think one thing I'll start is that in tutorial 5, this one here, on the tutorials and exercises page, there's like, I put a tut recording video there. In tutorial 5, I probably spent like a good 30 to 40 minutes of the tutorial this week going through like promises and multiple fetches and like await async and promise.all and just like a few other things that really related to like how do I, like, sure, promises make sense when you just like give a simple example that's like, you know, a dot then something, but you know, how do you actually deal with it if you've got like 10 things you need to make requests for at the same time, when you want them to all happen at once or in order. Yeah, so I kind of started that tutorial realizing that because I was like, I think I'll go down a very specific route here because I feel like it'll be a lot of questions students will have. So, you know, normally I think we'd kind of cover that in this lecture, but I just kind of got excited in my tutorial this week, and it was a good tut. I enjoyed that one, so that's a good place to look. Let me think about maybe some other things here. So, what are some common problems people run into with the assignment? Well, maybe let me just tease this out slightly more. So, we had our little login button, for instance, where you type in a username and password, which was Sophia, I think, was it? Maybe not. Oh, sorry, I have to run the back end. Silly. Okay, mount c dev. No dot. Okay, backend's running. Try it again. Sophia, login. Incorrect login details. Oh no, I've forgotten Sophia's path. Does anyone remember what Sophia? Cluttered, thank you. Great, welcome to the dashboard. So maybe just to tie off this example a bit more, it's like once we're on the dashboard, we actually want to, let's go to the API docs, which you know we can access via localhost 5000. You know that we can actually get people's posts. So if I'm interested in getting all the posts, right, lets you fetch it. Well, that's not what I want. Gets a post by user ID. Okay, well, how do I get all the posts? How do I do that? User feed, right? And again, I always get questions on the forum every term, private questions, public questions, which are just like, I don't know how this works. And I said this last week, but I just want to reiterate it again. It's like, I don't want to say that like this is a high quality API doc, but a lot of API docs, like I work with them every day. You know, there's been at least 6 or 7 APIs this year that I've had to go and build things for, and a lot of the time you just have to poke it. Like you just have to be like, because sometimes I get questions. It's like, what happens if I put in a invalid ID, or what happens if this is 0? What happens if this is too long? It's like just kind of, you just have to explore it. Normally what would probably happen in the real world is that if you were working with an API, the docs would make enough sense. You'd finish the rest of your knowledge by just exploring it, like by just, you know, poking it and playing around with it. And then you'd have some lingering questions, which you'd normally chase someone up about, which are, you know, good ones to chase up with us. So let's actually try and get the feed of this user. Now, I don't know what's going to be on their feed. I can't remember. I know some of you probably know who are further ahead, which is like maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. But how do we trigger that fetch? Well, in this case, we started the fetch as a result of clicking on a button. Whereas now, it's kind of going to happen like here. So you see how like what we did previously was like, the login button's clicked, we made a fetch. Once we got the result back, if the result was 200, we processed the JSON, which had the token in it, and then we updated all of the document elements respectively. So maybe what I'll do here is I'll do something like call a function called load dashboard or load feed. Right, and then down here I might just define it const load feed as a dummy function that just console logs loading feed. Right, so baby steps as always. I'm going to refresh this page. Sophia cluttered. Now here's the thing, I'm a lazy programmer, you're a lazy programmer. So rather than typing that name in over and over and over again, there's a couple of things I can do here. The first and most easy one is I could just, for the meantime, put the names into the actual value attributes of the HTML elements so that when I load up this page, I can just click login straight away and I get this. You'll also see that the loading feed console log did actually print here, which is good. So I know that when my feed, like when this page displays, I can actually load the feed. So what does loading the feed entail? Well, it entails calling this API point. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take I'm just literally going to copy and paste this and then remove stuff that I don't care about. Like this. That's a good place to start. And then you can see here, instead of calling auth login, I want to call user/feed. This one is a get, not a post. And then I have a look at these next properties. Okay, so this is a bit complicated, but we'll get to the detail in a second. And you see there's 3 parameters. And the first parameter is it's authorization P and N. But here's the thing about parameters in a lot of these RESTful API docs is the parameters can often be in different places. And sometimes they're in the query string, sometimes they're in the body, sometimes they're in the URL themselves, sometimes they're in the header. And in these cases, we've got 2 here which are in the query. Now the query typically means, I'm pretty sure from memory, actually in the URL. So for get requests, I think you'll put it here a lot, like this: p equals 0 and n equals 10. And if I'm wrong about this, I'll find out pretty quick. So maybe I'll explain it after I've checked if I'm not doing the wrong thing. Oh yeah, great. Okay, so basically post and put and delete requests, all of the information you send when they say things like body is you send it like this. You do body and then you stringify the JSON, you stringify the object into JSON, and then you get left with what you send to the body. The other part here though, you don't actually send a body for get requests, you put the information in the URL here. And the way it works in the URL is it's a pretty straightforward pattern, which is after the end of the path, you put a question mark, and then all of the variables and values that you're interested in are just like attribute equals value with an equals between it, and then all of those key pairs are just separated by ampersand. So, you know, this might be like end k equals 4 and j equals 5, stuff like that. So this is all good. But the one thing you notice here is that there's a header property called authorization. Now, a header property goes in the HTTP header. I know some people struggle with like, what is an HTTP header versus like, what is an HTTP body? Basically, the header is the metadata associated with the request. It's often there. It's not very domain specific a lot of the time. Like the header information you'll find will often be very generic. You know, sometimes when I've explained this to people, I've said, you know, it's a little like when you send a letter to people, you know, like you need a stamp, you need an address, you need a return address. Like these are all things particular to the letter you're sending, but they're not really to do with the content of it, right? So the header is usually just this metadata associated with it. Now, when we make any request to all of these user feed, post things that expect you to be logged in, they want you to send a token as part of that request to make sure that the person making the request is actually the owner of it. How does that token like get created and how does it get decoded? It's like, that's not really, it's not really relevant. Like that's just what the server does for you. But if we want to actually access these, and I'll show you if I just kind of get rid of this for now, let's try and actually call this request and get the result. And you can see that the result will either be 200. I will call, actually let's just copy this up here. So if the result's 200, we will JSON decode it, and then I'll just console log the result of that decoding. And if the result's 403, I will copy this incorrect, what is it, invalid auth token, like this. So let's just try this. Now, remember, this function will be called when the feed it loads the first time. So when I go back to my quick pick page, every time I refresh it, it loads the entire HTML again from scratch. So I click login, I get to the feed, I get invalid auth token, because you see here I've tried to call the server and it has given me a 403 response here. And it's doing that because I haven't given it the information it needs to validate who that's coming from. So essentially what I need to do is like, here, authorization needs to be the value of token and then that, like this. But the thing is, I don't want to put some static token in there. I actually want to put the token that was returned back here, which is stored inside this like document token thing here. So maybe I'll just do something like this. Okay, so I'm going to like authorization is token plus that. Okay, we got a feed. See, if you look in the sidebar here, it's like posts are an array. So there are no posts for this particular user. Okay, cool. That's good to know. We can poke around with that in a sec, which will be, well, there are no posts basically. And I'm going to show you how to poke around with the API. But yeah, this is a nice little demonstration. And you would have seen in the sample code that we gave you, there's a couple of files like api.py and helpers.py. These are things that aren't like super useful, but you might want to use them, but more importantly, start this out quite simple, because your smart programmer brains will very quickly realize that there's a lot of repeated code even just here, and you can start making nice little abstractions. There are other libraries you can use if you want to. I think I can't remember if we don't let you do external JavaScript, so actually maybe not. Sorry. I think I was mistaking that for assignment 3. Yeah, so yeah, it's cool. It works. Now, I'm hoping this makes sense, but a lot of you get left with a situation or a predicament where you're like, yeah, but I have no posts here. How do I add a post? So you go back to the API and you think, all right, well, I could make a post for someone, but you think about how the behavior of the application works, and you think, well, what is user feed? It returns an array of posts for the user pointed to. These posts are sorted, blah, blah, blah. The user's own posts do not show up there. Okay, well, that's a problem, because if I make a post, it's not going to show up. So it's going to be very hard for me to test this. And I think the problem, too, from memory, is that because I haven't followed another user, I don't know if I followed any users by default. Let's pretend I haven't. So you got to think about, well, how would I actually be able to demonstrate what's on the feed? Well, I would have to display the feed, and I would have to see some posts. Yeah? But I can only see posts of people that I'm following, so now I need to follow people. So I just want to take you through a little bit of troubleshooting that I would do if I were you, because you'll have other situations like this in the assignment. So the first thing I'm going to do when I want to do something fun is I'm going to go and explore the data. In fact, I might do the assignment 2 backend repo. So, oh no, sorry, it's in the actual. So I'm going to go down here, and from last week, we remember did this. It said we can explore the database by loading up sqlite.com and loading in a particular file. So let me just grab that file. Give me a sec. OpenDB. Oh, that's fine. 2 seconds. Yeah, so if I go file OpenDB, I go test.sqlite. This is in the actual backend folder. I've got 2 backend folders. That's not good. And it loaded everything up here, right? We got comments and posts and users. So again, I go to users and I think, well, I want to see all my users. So I right click on this and I click select. I want to see everyone. I see Sophia cluttered. Sophia has username, Sophia, user ID 2. Great. Okay, well, let's look at all the posts. Okay, so there's actually posts here already. Sweet. Well, that's good. I don't have to make some posts. And then I look, okay, well, who are the author of these posts? Lots of people. Is there anyone who makes multiple posts? So I'm having a look. Okay, so, I mean, even Sophia's already made a post. Sophia's made 2 posts. What's the first name people see that, Amelia? Was there 2 Amelias, or am I crazy? I think I saw 2 Andrew. I mean, I'm sure there's 2 of everything. 2 Hannahs. Okay, let's stick with Hannah, right? Andrew makes... Okay, we'll go with Andrew. Someone said Andrew. I don't know why I needed to copy that. So now I'm like, all right, well, Andrew has a bunch of posts. But here's the problem. Sophia does not follow Andrew, right? And I can see that even here when I look at Sophia, because there's no one that Sophia is following. Now, again, I don't need to understand SQL. I don't need to understand databases. This is a very straightforward graphic user interface here. So now I'm going to actually have to do the slightly harder thing. And this is a really powerful tool and tip, I guess, for going forward. So there's a whole bunch of what I guess you'd call API clients, which are tools that allow you to do what we're doing on JavaScript with the fetches, but in a more GUI user-friendly way. So a few of them that I think are pretty popular. We have ARC, which is Advanced REST Client. This is a very lightweight one. It's a Google Chrome add-on. There's Postman, which is another, they're all similar tools. and I don't know if they have screenshots. You know, they kind of look like this. They're just ways where you can basically like make fetches via a GUI. So Postman's another one, and then Insomnia is another one. I don't know if this one's a Chrome add-on though. Oh, there you go. It is. This is one I use a lot more recently. But I think one thing to flag though I find is that the advanced REST client is really lightweight and easy. In fact, we might even just do that one. I like it because like if you're not doing this stuff every day, it's just nice and simple. Like it doesn't have a whole bunch of features and optimizations that you just don't care about. So let's try this one out. So I just downloaded that Chrome add-on. I think other browsers might have add-ons. You can also download it as an Electron app separately. That's perfectly fine. But it's a really simple tool. And like, let's actually try this out together to make a request. So we know that, I mean, it's a really simple interface. We look at our first request, which was making a fetch to log in for post. So I go method is post, and then I'm going to copy and paste this URL here like that. Great. Now there are two headers. Okay, I need to include some headers. How do I do that? Oh, here we go. Header name, accept, application/JSON. You can see headers are fairly standard. And then content type is application/JSON again. All right. And the body is the JSON string. So I'm going to go to body now. And oh, cool. It actually has a JSON body type. And what do I have here? JSON visual editor. That sounds fun. Actually, I think that one can be more confusing for people. But so maybe just go with like raw input. And you can pretty much just write the JSON equivalent here. So I could be like username is Sophia. Password is cluttered. Like that. And then I just hit send. And it will send it to your backend. Your backend has to be running. If your backend's not running, then it won't work. You can see every time I click send here, it's actually functioning, and I'm getting a new token back. So it's a really great way to, play around with it. Vidan says, can you directly import the Swagger? You can for some. I'm not. I know you can for some. It's not something I'm going to make a fuss about yet, because I think that for people who haven't worked with these clients before, it's actually really good if they get to poke and play with them. Because not everything has Swagger docs, sadly, but that's perfectly fine to do. So we can show we can log in here. Now, what was it we said we wanted to do? Well, we said we wanted to make Sophia follow Andrew, right? So now rather than have to write out all this JavaScript and do all these fetches, I'm actually just going to try and do it directly inside this little tool here. So follow is a put request. It is /user/follow. The header is, what were the headers again? It was just, I think these two you normally leave here. It was authorization is token, and then the auth token. Oh, we already got an auth token. That's really handy. So we can use that one. We could have used any auth tokens here. And then it says the username is part of the query. Now, I feel like again there they mean the query and the URL. So try this out. Now, username equals Andrew. Now they're saying this will either return 200 okay, 400 if I give it bad input, 403 if I haven't given it an auth token, and 404 if the user's not valid. Let's try that actually with a bad user like Hayden. If I send this one, what do I get? Okay, 404 not found, right? So they're using these HTTP status codes to actually communicate with you the semantic surrounding the error. In this case, it's saying can't be found. But if I try Andrew, it says, okay, message success. All right, well, that's really good. Now, what happens when I go back here and I try and open up this database and I look at my users? I see that Sophia still isn't following anyone. Now, that's expected because the way that your backend works is that it takes a copy of the tests of the database when it starts up, and then all of the modifications that happen to it while it's running are just kind of happening while it's running. And when you stop the server and start it up again, it starts from scratch, you know? So, you know, sometimes you might want to save these particular routes. Like you can actually save this one here. I can be like, you know, I'd like to save this. You can do more interesting things with it if you want. Other tools, you could also write JavaScript to automate this for you. It's not that hard in JavaScript, honestly, but it's, you know, this is a little bit quicker, a little bit easier to work with. But we know it's actually happened in reality, because even though it doesn't reflect in the test database, which is like the template, we know that it's still, you know, actually functions. So next step is we would like to make sure that Sophia is following someone. So how do we do that? Let's go back to the API. User/follow. What happens when I do get user? I get all the people they're following. Great. User IDs are people they're following. That looks like. I can click on model. Doesn't really tell me much here. Just says list of integers. Okay. So let's try and call this one. I'm going to call get for /user, and it wants the username in the URL. So I'll call myself. Now, just to distinguish here, the authorization token tells you who's making the request. The username is who you're interested in finding information about. And I don't need ID here. That's interesting. Yeah, basically that's kind of saying you can pass the user ID of the requester in too. But let's just start with this. Username equals Sophia. I don't need anything else. I can just click send. Method is not allowed. Oh, post. Whoops. Get. Yep. Following. So now I'm following someone. Okay, so we can tell Sophia is following someone because they're following user 95. All right. So we come down here and we're like, who's user 90? Are we in users? Yep, 95. Andrew. Great. They're following someone. This is exciting because now we can go back to our actual application while the server's running. I can refresh this page, click login, and when it loads this up, I now have 4 posts because the user/feed is returning me all of the feed items I have, which are all the posts of the people I follow. And before it was empty because I was not following anyone, and now it's not empty because I am following someone, right? Which is good. So I click on this and I can see that there's 4 posts here and they all have different properties and stuff. And let's just try and display those. We'll just try and display those really quickly. And I'll make a real mess of it. So, you know, index.html here, let's just add another line, which is like, I'm going to say div ID equals posts, like this. Okay. So we're going to get the result, which is all the, I'll rename result to like data, and then posts is data posts, and then I'll say post.map. Map's a really great way to loop through things. I don't know, I've started to like it more. So basically for each post in posts, I want to do something, and I'll just console log this again here just so that we like take it one step at a time. So this should console log each post separately. At least then we know we can do something with it separately. So I'm going to log in, and then I get 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I got those 4 console logged, which is really good. Now I can also look at the data a little bit easier. I've got comments and ID. I got some meta, which is the author, description text, published, source, thumbnail. There's a lot of stuff here. So now what I'm going to do is maybe I'll just build some DOM elements by themselves now. So I'll say, you know, const postbox equals document.create element. Let's make a div. And then inside that div, let's set the inner text to be equal to post author. Let's just see if we can actually like put the author in a box and display it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to append that. I'm going to say document.getElement by ID. I want to get my posts, which is a little box that's in like here. It currently has width 0, so you can't see it. I will put that here, and then I will say dot append child. If that's, I always forget these ones. Postbox. So let's try that one, and let's see what happens now. I log in. Okay, so I get 4 undefined. So I've done some things right and some things wrong here, right? Clearly what I've done wrong is that the postbox inner text doesn't really work because this here is resolving to undefined. Now, why is it resolving to undefined? Well, again, I've probably... What have I done wrong here? So you can see that the author is actually part of the meta object here. So it's actually the post.meta.author here. Like, it's kind of like this. It's the meta author. So we can try this now. Log in. Andrew. Now, remember in JavaScript, the like Python style dictionary structures and your like object, maybe Java like ones, they're interchangeable here. So both of these would work fine. I'd probably do this more often just because I think it's a little bit easier to read. So now let's actually populate these with a bit more detail, right? So I know I have my author, so that maybe we'll say we need to create a few more elements inside of this div, right? So we first need to create like the author element, the description element, and maybe the image. Let's put the image there. So the author element might be like, I'll call it like author element equals document.create element div. We'll make like a bunch of divs here. Another one for the description, another one for the image. Description element, image element, like this. Now inside the author element, let's say author element dot inner text equals post.meta.author. Great. We'll do the description elements inner text is equal to, well, let's have a look. It's also one of the meta, so we'll just change this to description, description text. And then the image one you can see here is a source and a thumbnail. So you'd figure this out if you just poked around with it, but source is the full image and thumbnail is the small image. So what I'll say here is that this one's inner text should be, we'll start off with this as just post.thumbnail. Okay? Now we actually want to append each of these to our post box. So I'll say postbox.append child. Author element. And I'll do the same thing here for description element. And I'll do the same thing here for image element. So we're just applying the knowledge we've learned in week 3 and week 4, even a little bit of week 2, so that hopefully now I've created a post, for each post I've created a post box. And I have then created 3 smaller components in it, and then basically slap those all together, right? So 4 boxes, and each box is made up of 3 elements. Okay, I don't seem to be getting my author, which is kind of annoying. Maybe it's there, but the image is confusing it. So what's happening here is that there's a lecture on this about image types. You can go watch them. It's like week 4, I think. Image types, where we talk about like base 64 encoded images. But basically, this image element, instead of making a div, we're going to make a image thing here, which instead of setting the inner text to this, we'll set the image source to be the thumbnail. So we'll try this one out. Okay, so you can kind of see we've got these posts here. Now, these posts are not very clear. Like they're all separate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a class to each post box, right? Oh god, I always forget. Class name equals, I'll call it post box. Now we'll go add some CSS to the top of our index.html, or even better, we'll add it to some kind of, some styles file. Maybe I'll make my own styles. I'll just use the provided ones. But we use postbox, and we'll say that it has a padding of 10 pixels, a margin of 10 pixels, a border of 1 pixel solid, very dark gray. Great, we'll try that out. So now this should hopefully separate these boxes out a bit. Okay, cool. So like we're slowly getting somewhere, which is nice. We still don't have the author, right? Because I think you've all typed out there's a typo in it. Just haven't gotten to that. The typo for the author here being that what was your comment? Description is description element, not author element. Yeah. Bam. Okay. Andrew, maybe we'll add here like the inner text can be like by someone. Or what's even better than doing this concatenation is doing the backticks in JavaScript, which allow you to do kind of like f strings in Python, something a little bit like cleaner. That's probably a more acceptable way to do something like this. Backticks are very, very elegant ways of dealing with strings. So we log in, we get something like this, great, but the images aren't there. Now the reason the images aren't there is because if you've watched the base64 encoded lecture, let's do a baby rhino. You go have a look at a base64 encoded image, like this little rhino here, right? If I copy the link address, is that an actual link, this one? Wow, okay. If I copy the link address here, the image address, you see that it's a base64 encoded image, but take a look at it. Even though it's a whole bunch of gibberish, the first part of it is actually this kind of header information that tells you something about it. But if we go back to our page and you look at the thumbnail image, it just kind of starts from the gibberish. It doesn't actually have like this whatever part here. So one thing you can do here, for instance, is just go and take that and let's try it out. Let's see if we can get it right and put that in front. So I might go, what is it? It's like comma that. Okay, because our thumbnail has all the actual image information but not the header for it. And I've probably missed something here, so let's see this out. Okay, so why is this still not working? Well, we can inspect the element. We can have a look inside the post box, and we see the image is still blank. And that's because what I'm doing here is like, I'm pretty sure I need to set attribute, right? So like, I don't think I can just do .source. I think I actually need to say set attribute, because it's like an HTML attribute. So I'm going to set the source attribute to be this value. And we'll try this one out. See how this one goes. Okay, still not doing it. Maybe I've done it wrong. Well, clearly that's not working. So what's gone wrong here? What isn't working? Is there a problem with what I'm setting it to? Maybe I could check the console. Sometimes there's errors on the console. Doesn't seem to be any errors there relating to my code, which isn't helpful, because I'm still not sure why my image doesn't have a source attribute here. Does anyone have any ideas? Come on, big brains. I know you can do it. Using the wrong variable? What do you mean I'm using the wrong variable? What should I be using? Yeah, like that might be a problem. It might not be a JPEG. It might be a PNG, which is part of the problem. You were nearly there, she. Like I just wanted you to tell me explicitly what it is, but you're on the right track. Yeah, so Vedan's noticed this, which is like, and you got to be careful of these things. You notice here we're actually setting the attribute of the post box, not of the image element. And this is like, and you can actually see this mistake happening here. Notice that all of these post box divs are actually getting a source of that image, so it's being applied to the wrong element. So I can replace this here, and hopefully this will now fix our problem. Okay, right. So now we are loading up the images, and like, honestly, that is the assignment. Like what we did on last week and this stuff, like the rest of the assignment is, in the most part, just basically repeating things we've done there, which is like understanding the API, making requests to it, trying to print things out. I hope you can take something away from like just trying to do these things gradually, like, because if you do all these things in baby steps, piece by piece, it's so much easier to debug it and figure it out. You know, and I'm not saying this as someone who, like, I didn't write this assignment, I've never done this assignment, this is the most code I've ever written for this assignment, but if you take things in steps, it's usually quite okay to tackle it. So Then my next question there is just going to be like, do you have any questions about this so far? Like, is there any follow-ups from stuff we've done, or, you know, because I feel like I've kind of covered a quite a wide array of it at the moment, so I'm curious where people still have questions or concerns or anything like that. How will you check the user feed if a new user logged in? You will do it in an API, or do we need to hard code to follow someone? You're going to have to help me understand your question. So how will we check the user feed if a new user logged in? Well, what do you mean? As if Sophia logged out and then another user like Andrew logged in? Is that what you mean? I'll just wait for Zenji's response. I mean, when a new user logs in not following. Well, I'm not really sure, because like if a new user logs in and doesn't follow, it doesn't really have any impact. Sure, sorry. I understand what you're saying. That's a good question. Yeah, sorry, I understand. So you're like, okay, if you sign up and you're not following anyone, how do you follow someone? So there's a couple of these gray areas in the specification where we're actually interested in like seeing you try and solve these problems, because you have to remember, just because we don't ask you to do something, it doesn't mean it like can't be done, if that makes sense. So like, you know, you might go through something like this and you're like leaving comments, updating a post, adding a post, following, profile view, feed, pagination, you know, showing the feed and stuff. And you're like, okay, sure, I get the feed thing, but how do I follow someone? Well, what do we have here in like 2.4? It's like follow. Let a user follow or unfollow another user to add, remove their posts. I don't know why that's two O's, I'm sorry. Add and remove their posts from their feed, right? So the part of this is that 2.4.2 says that you should allow, like, you should build something that lets a user follow or unfollow another user. How do you want to do that? Like, this is where you just have to think, well, what is a logical way to approach that? You know, should I give them a list of users to follow? Should I give them a page of users where they can click on ones and follow? Like, this one's totally up to you. We just want you to, you know, do what you think is best and have some fun with it. But yeah, like, you will need to actually like do something to make that happen. But in the meantime, like, there's a little bit of chicken and egg with this whole assignment. And that's why we also showed you the API client and looking at the database, because, you know, there are some things like displaying the feed, which like you might want to do before you ever figured out how to follow, or however you or before you figure out how to what would you say? Yeah, like before you figure out how to post and stuff. Vedant says, I skipped over. Let me come back to your question, Hongtao. Vedant says, I have perhaps interesting question regarding HTML DOM creation. If we decide to implement elements dynamically, what should happen to them if we navigate to a different page? Well, that's totally up to you. You can either remove the elements from the DOM altogether, or you can just hide them. And, you know, hiding them's kind of easier because you can unhide them later if you need to. The downside of hiding, though, is if your elements are huge, you can obviously have a page that's very costly. Like, the browser has a lot of trouble rendering it and loading it because it's very heavy. But you're probably unlikely to run into that problem specifically. Um, for instance, if we have a user feed with X posts and navigate to another user's profile, should those DOM elements be recreated, reused, and doesn't matter? No, there's no specific way to do it. Reusing them, recreating them, it's a little bit of design choice, right? Like sometimes you can reuse them as cache, but then repopulate it through some kind of lazy load. You can just hide it. I think usually destroying it and rebuilding it's probably the most common route, though, I would say. So Hong Tao is a good question, which is, when we refresh the page, how to keep the user logged in all the time? And then the second question is maybe cover a little of how to do infinite scrolling. Infinite scrolling I won't go into like a ton of detail on, but they're two questions I'll answer. If you have any other questions, keep writing in the chat. Just because it's 6:52, let's take a 5-minute break now and start up just before 7. And then we'll go through some of these questions until we run out of questions. Cool? So, chat in 5 minutes. Where's my... Oh no. Has my phone died? Oh, this happens sometimes. Me camera. Oh, my phone's dead. Alright, let me just pause the recording. Okay, so, let's get back into it. Oh, that's really loud, I'm sorry. Let's get back into it. There are 4 questions that have come up. Is that rain really loud, by the way? It's very soothing for me, but I don't know how much of it's picked up by the microphone. Like when I'm talking and stuff. Do you want me to shut the window? You tell me. Just before I keep talking. It's ASMR. Okay. You say that now until the YouTube video comments like, can you fix your microphone? So I see about 4 questions have been asked. I'm just going to go through them in no particular order. Devansha said, I had a question about thumbnail earlier. Will we need it at a later part of the spec? So typically what happens is that when you deal with any kind of large image, like in the case of a quick pick post, when you're loading up pages, you don't want to load up big images and scale them down, right? Like in a general sense, the image you load on a page, the pixels you use to display it should be about the same as like the actual size of the image. And I'll give you a great example of where this is not the case, right? So if I go to perla.com, which is a company I'm associated with, right? And I right click on just the top left image here, the logo. See how it, like, look at its size for a second, right? Its size is, oh, my head's in the way, but that should be fine. Yeah. Its size is 125 pixels wide, but when I get the image location and I open this, have a look how large it is. It's actually a very, very large image. In fact, that's the actual physical size of it. Now, this is terrible. This is terrible because your web browser is basically having to load all of these kilobytes that aren't being used, because the more kilobytes you have, the more clarity the image has, and the more clarity the image has, the bigger it can go. But if it's not going big, then the kilobytes are wasted. So what often happens on most websites and web systems is you'll have your main image if they're big images, and then you'll have smaller ones. And in fact, quite often you might have a series of different smaller ones. So Facebook is probably a good example. I don't really know what they do, but lots of companies would do it like this. When you're scrolling through the timeline and you see a little thumbnail photo as part of 4 photos, that's probably actually that size. There's a whole different photo. And when you click on it, you're going to get a slightly bigger one, which is like, how would you put it? It's like, it's not the full image, but it's bigger. And you'll actually notice this sometimes. Or sometimes it might be big, but it might be pixelated because the quality's really poor. And people do this because sometimes you just want to see the little image really quick and you can get the big image later. For this assignment, it's a little bit strange how they design the backend, because typically what happens is you want to have small thumbnails so that all of your page loads really quick and you're not trying to load like 1 megabyte images everywhere. It's not the case anymore because they've fixed it up since then, but last term I pointed out, there's an old video on it. I could probably like find it. I couldn't be bothered because we'll waste 10 minutes. But they had this page on the old Sunswift website where all of these images here were actually like huge images, like absolutely huge images. They were like 3 megabytes each. So what's happened is someone's literally, well, not now, they fixed it, but like someone used to take photos that were like 3 megabytes, like a full proper like 10 megapixel image, and they would just include that on the page as a source, and they would just set the width and height, right? One sec. And again, the page takes so long to load, and the page is like 50 megabytes. Imagine that, like loading a web page is like the equivalent of downloading a series of YouTube videos. So, you know, good that that's fixed. It's like, it still happens everywhere on the internet. But the weird thing is that normally that's useful because you don't have to pull all the data. What's a little bit strange about how the assignment's structured is that the way base64 encoded images work is that you're actually sending the whole image anyway over the request. So when you send a full-size image as a base64 encoded thing, it's like huge. So you're not really speeding things up by getting smaller versions, because the smaller versions aren't going to come any quicker because you're sending the big ones. That being said, even if you're doing something like this, sometimes thumbnails might be different. They might be cropped, right? Like an actual image is a whole bunch of sizes. It might be like portrait, it could be like some landscape thing. But maybe all of your thumbnails want to be square. So there's lots of different reasons for that. And you know, you can use them how you'd like in the assignment. I hope that kind of vaguely answers it. Like, that's why you have it, so you can display the mini image and display the full image later. Or like, not later, but like in another way. If someone wants to zoom in on it, for instance, or just see it bigger. I'll go back to Hong Tao's question, which is, when I refresh the page, how do I keep them logged in all the time? That's a great question. Typically, we use cookies for this. So if I go JavaScript set cookie, let's see what I get. The vanilla JavaScript, like the raw JavaScript cookie stuff, is pretty raw. Like, it's allowing you to set cookies on a browser as like a raw object. Now, what is a cookie? It's actually it's very similar to local storage. So if you've seen the local storage lecture, it's a lot like that. It just so happens that like cookies are a really old concept. The idea was like, wouldn't it be nice to store a dictionary of strings on a user's browser so that like when they come back to a website, we have some information associated with them that means they can stay logged in, or we can keep their preferences or something. So it's kind of like a client-side database is how to think about cookies and local storage and everything else. Local storage is just the bigger, you know, you can do more. There's like, it's bigger and badder in like the, you know, good sense. But cookies have some other benefits which we're not going to get to in this course, like, you know, how they're sent over HTTP and other things. But generally, you'd store things like token and cookies. So when someone logs into my site, what I'll do here is on page load, I will print out a cookie. I will call it document.token. It's going to be undefined probably. So let's try this out. I reload this page. It says undefined. Now what I'm going to do is that when someone logs in, I currently set their this thing to their token. I'm going to set a cookie that is token equals result.token. I'm going to see if just something really simple like this works. You would probably use local storage for this, just to be clear, because that would be a lot easier. I'm just showing you cookies because I don't think we actually talk about it much in the course, but you'd probably want to use local storage because it's easier. Now when I click login, the page loads, and when I refresh the page, it's still undefined because I must have done something wrong. Let's try printing it out right after we define it. It's cookie. I named it a different thing because my brain is a peanut. Alright, log in. Refresh the page. Still not working. My brain is barely a peanut at this stage. Console.log, log in, refresh the page. I didn't even look. Log in. I'm moving too quick. Invalid auth token. Token equals that. Why is this not loading when I reload the page? How strange. Maybe it's because I'm not doing what it asked for, which is all this expires stuff. So let's try and put this expires stuff in. I'd never set cookies like this, by the way, so I'm having fun trying to do it. Trying to do it this weird old way. Okay, log in. There's the cookie. Now when I refresh the page, still no cookie. Well, I'm fresh out of luck. I'm probably doing something stupid. I am now doubting, creating a cookie. Am I missing something? JavaScript can, create, write, whatever. Okay, I can just do the thing. What's this problem? Is anyone smarter than me and just can, tell me? Oh, it's oh. Yeah, sorry. Oh my god. Thank you. Let's try this out. Okay. So now we're setting the cookie, and then we refresh the page, it's there. Derp. Thank you. Yeah, so this one's kind of weird because I'm not really sure how to set multiple cookies this way, to be perfectly honest. It's a very confusing way to do it. Normally you'd be doing things like I don't know, if you were doing React.js set cookie, they'd have some cookie library and the code for it's pretty simple. It's we add a new cookie. A lot of times you set cookies on servers and things, but again, I'm just think of it like local storage. So we've got this cookie here, which is like that. So now it's stored locally. So when we load the page up, if we want to, for instance, we could actually extract the token. So let's say I go, if document.cookie exists, then I want to extract the actual token part of this. So I want to get rid of these first 6 characters. How do I do that? I mean, I could do it simply by say, token is equal to document.cookie dot split. I want to split it on the equals and take the second part of that, right? So turn it into an array of 2 items and take the second part. Console.log token, like this. So now I should be able to, yep, there's my token. Perfect. So now I can do something when the page loads, where I can say, I can actually toggle what's displayed. So how did we toggle between this yellow page and this green page before? Well, upon login, we changed the login screen to the dashboard screen, right? We made those 2 visible and 1 invisible. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extract this out and turn it into a function. This function is going to be called show dashboard, maybe. And then I'm going to create a function called hide dashboard. And hide dashboard will do the exact opposite. So it will just kind of set things that way. Does that make sense? So I can show and hide it. Now what this means is that when I click login, and if I log in successfully, I'd like to show the dashboard. And let me just change dashboard to feed, because feed makes more sense. Right? Okay. Well, what I also want to do is not just on the login click button, but if when the page loads, I detect a cookie, I want to load the feed, right? Cool. So this makes sense. I refresh the page, the cookie exists in the browser, so now the dashboard loads immediately. What's one of the problems with this? Well, you can see here that the stupid way that I was storing the token before was that I wasn't actually storing it in a variable. I was actually accessing it here via a DOM element, which is mind-bogglingly poor practice. So instead of storing it in a DOM element, I'm just going to instead store it as a global variable up here. I'll call it const global token, or user token equals undefined, like this. And in fact, We can actually just pull this whole thing up here. Ah, no, we won't. Let me... Yeah. Let's do this. Let's say that the global token is... the user token is undefined until we check if the cookie exists. And then if the cookie exists, we set that to be the variable, and then we show the feed. And the show feed will display the dashboard. And then here, this is really cool, because like when we load the feed here, we can just use the user token instead of pulling from that DOM element. So when we load this dashboard now, when I load this page, it should... Well, it's loading the dashboard, but it's not loading the feed. And why it's not loading the feed is because when we log in, we call show feed and then load feed after that. But we actually want to load the feed every time we show it. So I'm actually going to go move this load feed into my like show feed function, so that after it shows the feed, it then immediately loads it. So this is good because now the feed will be shown either upon login or on page load if the cookie's detected. And obviously I've got some funky function declaration orders here, which I need to sort out. Bam. And then if I wanted to, I could add a logout button. So I could go back to my index.html and I could add a button here that's like, you know, button ID equals logout, button, logout, and I could, I could bind this one pretty quick. I should call it logout button to be consistent, like a good little programmer. Logout button, on the click we will hide feed. Now I don't know if I actually need to like log them out properly, but cool. So the feed loads, I click log out, I get taken back to this page, I click login, I get taken back to this page. It says invalid auth token because I didn't set the auth token properly now, because I'm still actually like storing it in the HTML element, so I should actually say user token equals result.token, like that. Yep, log out, log back in, log out, refresh the page. When I'm logged out, I'm still logged in. Oh no. Well, that's because when we look at the API, there is no like kind of logout function here, so we actually need to clear the cookie, because that's the problem. We click log out, even though we hide one element and show one element, the cookie still exists. So if we want to delete a cookie, we have to go, if we want to delete the cookie, we have to do this. So when I click log out here, I'm also going to set the document cookie to be token equals nothing, like that. See if this works. Log out, refresh. What? Why did that half load? I don't get it. So somehow it's loaded up the dashboard. Oh, so I think what's happened here, really interesting, is this is how I deleted the cookie, which they say like to do that you just and then set the expiry. Okay, so what I've missed here is that the deleting of a cookie happens by, if you set the expiry to something in the past, the cookie will immediately delete itself when it tries to be added to the browser. So now when I click log out, the cookie is like actually deleted. Right, so now, log in, yep, refresh the page. Oops. Cool, log out, refresh the page. I clicked log out, refresh the page. Yep, okay, that seems fine. And I think, like, just to be clear, like, there was also this question about routing from Jeff. So, Jeff, like, routing is actually all quite similar to this in terms of you're just... all you're doing is you're having buttons that essentially, like, toggle between different states. And then you ask about project structure. So, one of the reasons that, like... what would you say? One of the reasons that like vanilla JavaScript is really hard as well is it's not very structured by default, and there's honestly no great way to structure it because you wouldn't really build applications like this with it either. So how would you structure it? Well, you're probably going to have one HTML page, and then you realistically probably just want to break your JavaScript up into multiple documents. However you think that is best to do. That's totally up to you. Ive says, by confirming Control-Shift-R resets the cookie, but doing Control-R doesn't. No, so Control-Shift-R refreshes the page, but it also clears the cache. Right, the cache is your browser saving files and images so that it doesn't have to make network requests all the time and pages can load quicker. You can see that again if I load up like, unsw.edu.au, and it's a kind of a boring page. Now let me find something else. What's a fun page? City of Sydney. That was also boring. I don't know. What's a page with a lot of images? Someone give me something. What was that? What was that one? Like, visit COMP6080? Whatever one I put in shoot one, because I like COMP6080. When you load a page for the first time... Oh, they've got a stupid loading screen. God damn it. Everyone's websites are so complicated these days. Now my refresh isn't... Everything's going bad for me right now. Okay, anyway, I'm not going to demonstrate that, but... yeah, so Control-Shift-Refresh removes the cache as well. As opposed to just reloading the page. Patrick, Kevin, what's the difference between null and undefined? Not like they're just different. It's this like horrible anomaly of JavaScript, and there's not a lot we can do about it. But it's like null and undefined are both two things that mean not something. It's just that they aren't equivalent. So generally speaking, if you're using them in a context where someone's already defined like null or like basically most times you're not going to be using null and undefined as meaningful values in the same context. Usually for like some APIs, some modules, they'll use null a lot to denote the lack of something. For other ones, they'll use undefined a lot. So just know that they're frustratingly the same thing yet different. It's a short answer. Advanch says, what's the favicon error when you reload the page? So the favicon error when I reload the page is usually most web pages, even if you don't... Wait, did we specify it? Even if you don't specify it, they will try and get a favicon. What are all these little blue and orange and green things and the sheep and stuff? Just because browsers like those things, because otherwise the internet's kind of miserable to explore. So that's your browser basically being like, I don't care whether you told me to look for this. I'm looking for it, and I couldn't find it. Rar, like anger. So you can get rid of that by actually including one, by actually including a favicon on the page. Okay, last question, maybe cover a little of how to use infinite scroll. Okay, so this one's tough because it's really hard to like demonstrate it without giving you the method. Generally, you'll find a lot of things to Google, like if you're like, how to implement infinite scroll, and honestly, that's a great place to start. Like, there'll be a ton of resources and articles about that. You'll probably want to say like vanilla JS here, not React, because most of the things you'll get these days will be like React based. So, you want to do you want to look for vanilla stuff, right? Implement infinite scroll with pure or vanilla JS. Great, done. Now you can read through this and stuff, but I'll just give you the basic summary. The way infinite scroll works is that you load, say, 10 images on a page, and you just need to find a way to tell when someone has scrolled to the bottom of the window. And when they hit the bottom of the window, you simply make another API call, right? So imagine if there's like 50 images or 50 posts. Well, it makes sense to like, you get infinite scroll, right? You load 10, they scroll to the bottom. You load another 10, they scroll to the bottom. You load another 10, they scroll to the... You just keep doing that and, kind of iteratively loading more and more until you run out. I don't think I want to maybe take you through that, because I feel like you're all capable enough to think about, okay, well, I have to do multiple fetches. Like, you can apply the fundamentals we've talked through to solve that problem. I think the tricky part, though, which is the truly novel part of that, is how do you tell when they're at the bottom of the page, right? So, and I tell you, if I Google this and I get at the top link, I'm going to be very upset with everyone for asking this question. How do I tell if Eggs are off. My dog is What's with dogs and eggs? These are some weird questions. Okay. How do I tell if user has... I can't... Oh my god. What the hell? How do I tell if user has scrolled to bottom of page? Now, here's one problem with this. This is jQuery, right? Anytime you start seeing lots of dollar signs and stuff, it's usually jQuery, which sucks because you couldn't use, like, this is okay. Maybe. So, you kind of roll. Obviously, this wasn't going to be an easy answer. I was kind of joking before. But, I kind of scroll through these and I'm like, okay, there's more jQuery. jQuery is a very easy way to do stuff, so... did scroll to bottom. Element scroll top plus element client height equals element scroll height. I'm not sure what element is. Maybe that could just be document. I'm not sure. Let's try some of these out. So I might have to do this once I'm logged in because the page is longer once I'm logged in, right? So all we're trying to achieve here is that when I hit the bottom, I want the browser to say, like, done. So, and again, I'm not trying to give you too many answers here. I'm kind of uncomfortable with this already, but let's try this out. I'm going to use a timeout. I'm going to use an interval. So every 1 second, I want this to run. So we can use this to, like, just keep track of how something's going. In fact, let's do it every half a second. So every half a second, I want it to console log for me, pregnant cat, right? Okay, so it's doing that. Sorry, I'm sneezing. So now I want to see what some of these values are. So let's actually try and print out, let's see document dot scroll top. See if this is even a valid thing. Refresh the page. Undefined. Okay. Well, what happens if we try and do body? I mean, that is body. Main? I don't know. What happens if we do document dot get element by ID main dot scroll top? What does this give us? 0. Okay. All that tells us is that it's the top of the page. And let's try some printing out some other things. So we got scroll top, and then we also want to print out client height and scroll height. Okay, let's see what all three of these are. Oh, it didn't like that. Did not like that. 962. I scroll down. Nothing's changed here. Right? Now, I genuinely do feel like a little bit uncomfortable going through this much further, but I'm trying to kind of indicate to you that there are lots of interesting, properties on the window and documents and other things that you can poke around with, right? And you'll start printing some of these out, do exactly what I've done. Like, this is not helpful. You can see as I've scrolled up and down the page, these three values don't change. So this is clearly not what I'm looking for, right? And that's fine. I'll just go look for something else. But that's kind of the process you go down. And eventually you'll find a way how to tell if you're scrolled at the bottom. And then you just trigger something. You know what I mean? Like, that's the very high level approach to it. I know that might not be all the detail you want, but hopefully that's that's helpful. So there's one last question. I mean, you can ask some more if you want. I'm happy to wrap up whenever there's run out of questions. Vedant says again, just on JS file structure, is it okay if we have just the main.js? I have quite a lot of functional code working that way for the milestones, which may break if separated. It's hard for me to like give an answer to that specific question. What I'd say though is like files that are too large are generally considered bad style because it's harder to like file separation is a way of helping organize things and breaking them up into components. So I'd be very surprised if you wrote code so succinctly that putting it all in one file did not feel like a little bit too much, you know? It's possible, but like the main thing is like, you know, a tutor's going to mark this and they're going to open a file and they're either going to be like, yes, or they're going to be like, holy crap, this is a giant file and they have no other files. Why didn't they break it up? So I think that's just a thing to be aware of. So in most cases, students are going to want to try and break up their files, but it's also something that they also don't really have to worry too much about until like you get deeper into it, you know, like don't preemptively try and break things up. Like I would not break anything up until I get like past the first couple of milestones. Otherwise you're just you know, prematurely optimizing. Yeah, you know, I didn't say it was like fun and enjoyable necessarily, but it's that's the standard we're working with, so that's sadly what I have to communicate, which I know isn't fun news. Are there any other questions about assignment 2 we want to talk about today? Oh, bonus, sorry, I keep ignoring that. So, bonus questions for assignment 2. Bonus, whatever. Friend, oh, did I write friend? Oh god. This is just meant to say front-end form validations. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Yeah, that's just meant to say front-end form validations in terms of, you know, rather than the server responding with like a 400, you just give them nice little error texts, and you know the box goes, you know, like a normal nice website, you like type in the wrong thing and before you even can click submit, it actually like tells you that you've got something wrong. You know, something like that. There's a lot here, and I always get these questions again that are like, you know, well, what's enough? It's like, yeah, it's just to, and I'm not talking to you specifically, but the point of the bonus marks section is not to say to a student, hey, this is a place to get marks, because we're basically asking you to do a whole bunch of cool stuff for 5%. Like, no sane person would think that's that's a bit dramatic. Very few sane people would think that's an efficient use of their time to get marks. The point of the bonus marks is not so like people can get marks by doing bonus stuff. The point is that for people who just happen to be passionate about doing some extra things because they love learning, we'll give you a little tiny piece of chocolate, like, you know, like, oh, here you go, like this is a finite reward for you. Could the logout cookies feature count as bonus marks? So, yes, short answer, yes. If it's not asked for in the spec, it's considered bonus marks. What I would say is that what I usually say to tutors when they mark this stuff is I say, give them full marks for bonus marks. This is assuming that tutors are like competent, like quite competent web developers. I'll say to them something like, you know, give them full marks for bonus marks if their bonus marks seem like something that altogether would have taken you, you know, an extra 12 hours of work or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't have a number. I'm not gonna give you a hard number. Like, if you really need one, I can just stick with 12. But that's like the general approach we take. So the question, like, can something count as a bonus mark? Yeah, it's just the way we mark it is not like, wow, that feature is so cool, I love it, here's like a ton of marks. We look at it and we're like, was that like, were you genuinely pushing the boundaries there? You know, like, so adding like a one line thing to make your stuff better will be considered fairly light. So, you know, people who do like a bunch of small things and someone who does a bigger thing will get similar marks. Cool. Any other questions? Are we allowed to attend the help sessions on campus if we don't attend the tutorials on campus? Yes, but preference is always given to people that are enrolled at those times. So you do always run the risk of a tutor saying that, sorry, the class is full, turn around. So my genuine recommendation is if you're someone who's already on campus, or you live on campus, or you live next door to campus, then like, sure, try and drop by. Might as well, if you want to. If you're someone who lives in like, Parramatta and like, it's like an hour trip in, I would absolutely not come in just to like use the help session, because there is a chance that you just like literally would waste your time. I don't know how likely it is, but like I would just feel weird encouraging that. So short answer is probably. It's the best one I have. Cool. Any other questions? Last call, otherwise we'll wrap it up. Does Perler implement infinite scroll? We do, but I didn't do it, so I don't know how it's done. Patrick says, is there help sessions next week? I'll make some. What I'll probably do is I'll probably rip like a bunch of help sessions out of week 7. Because most of you aren't going to go to the help sessions in week 7 because, like, it's like none of you go to help sessions the week an assignment's released. You just don't. A couple of you do, but most of you don't. So, I'll probably just do that. I'll probably just try and rip some out of the latter weeks and move them into week 6. So I'll talk to the tutors about that. We'll do them at probably the same times. It'll just be like, yeah. Anyway, I'll update you on Sunday or something when I send out a notice about it. Cool. Rather than go in circles about asking more questions, because I've been doing that for like 20 minutes, let's just wrap it up there. And I'll say a little funny thing on my head. Thanks, everyone, and those watching the recording. I hope you're not watching this too late. If, yeah, good luck. If there's, when's it due? It's due on like when is it due? 29th of March? Yeah. Anyway. If you're watching this after like the 27th, then, good luck. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.